Happy Halloween, everyone. No, I can't do that. Hey, did you all know that sex advice columnist Dan Savage had, and quite possibly still has, often suggested that we let the straights have Halloween? He said other things that I prefer not to get into, but also I will never give up Halloween to the straights. This is our holiday. Just because my body is an eldritch nightmare never to be perceived at length by people, and I therefore don't publicly celebrate, I am in fact entirely petty enough to be mad about this thing he said back in 2009. So Hades is one of those games, and by one of those games, I mean a Supergiant game, and we know how I'm deep in the pocket of big super super giant big. I'm starting the essay over. Hades is a genuinely tricky game to really write about. I spent a lot of time dealing with it because, you know, it's good. Like, this isn't going to be like a takedown video on Hades. It's a good game. In a lot of technical ways, it's the best game Supergiant's made, and certainly the one that I put the most time in, and yet I feel odd about it. It's hard to figure out why, and I'm sure that people can and have in some cases just sung the game's praises and went on, but I want to figure out what it is about Hades has gotten under my skin and why I didn't feel like this when I first started playing it back in early access. So, the construction of Hades is pretty simple. You're a Zagreus, the prince of the underworld, trying to escape out of your father Hades' house by committing big violence through Tartarus, Asphodel, Elysium, the Temple of Styx, and finally confronting the big man himself outside. At any given point through this process, if you die, you go back to the start and try again. It's a roguelike, the genre of games that are like tight, smaller games that you play over and over and are a little different each time. Hades is bringing its own weird spin to the genre. Diegesis. What's Diegesis? Look it up. Okay, fine. In brief, in this case, every death, every gift, conversation, bit of narration, music, etc. exists for both our own purposes as the gamer and for the characters in the game itself, or at the very least, Zagreus. This is a neat twist for a roguelike slash roguelite, a difference I'm not super well informed on, but it's fine because it doesn't matter, because they're often more abstracted out. Your character dies or succeeds and you respawn and do it again. You know, it do be that way, but by making the whole of Hades diegetic, it lends itself to a certain amount of levity and humor. Zagreus uncovers plot points accidentally by the narrator talking about it and him overhearing it. We get several frank conversations about how Zagreus and Negra's relationship has taken on a weird dimension where they try to kill each other semi-regularly, a conversation that's weirdly echoed in the end of the game. The game has an end, we'll get to it, and that's all great. However, something about the setup does kind of bother me, and I think to start unpacking it, we should look at a different game called Hades Early Access. So I was one of those weirdos who got the game early access right at the time that they had the final boss coded in, but not what happens after that. You see the stuff on the screen now? This text crawl, where the narrator is giving some weird excuse for how Zag dies before leaving, that's what it was for early access all the time. You only get this now after you beat the game, but before that, this was the only answer to your efforts. Zagreus fights through the underworld tooth and nail, kills his girlfriend, the Lernian Bone Hydra, my boyfriend Asterius, and his boyfriend Theseus, and his dad, and then inexplicably, whoops, something happened. Time to try again. I'm honing in on this because the wonderful folk over at Supergiant were conscious of this strange way to prematurely end a game, so it became this mystery. No one really knew what was happening, but he couldn't leave, and the more you dug into it, the more it started to seem that basically no one could leave. When you die regularly in Hades, this banner shows up. There is no escape. Cool. For a while during early access, crossing the threshold outside after killing Dad gave you a different banner. Is there no escape? I'm going to try and find this. I can't show you this anymore, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to find it. It was haunting to me that there was this hanging mystery, something just wrong with the underworld, and it fit, right? Asphodel, like, in the text of the game, Asphodel was once a pleasant meadow, part of the afterlife, but the river Phlegethon has started to run through, setting everything on fire. There are things deeply wrong in the underground, and it became this genuine mystery, right? Things are breaking, people are living their tortured posthumous existences out in private agonies, and in this premature version of the game, one of those mysteries... I lost my place. In the premature version of this game, one of those mysteries was the ability to leave at all. This was something I'm going to circle back to later, but I wanted this to be established now to provide the contrast of the game with the ending it has. There is, I just want to point out, nothing wrong with the way Hades ends per se. It's just preordained. Let me explain. Zagreus visits his mother after escaping past his father out to the underworld to Persephone, his mom is Persephone's little secret garden in the dead of an eternal winter. There, Zag finds out that he can't really stay on the surface, not for very long, before his body gives out and he returns to the underworld. This is kind of because of a deal that's also going on with his father, who also can't really leave the underworld for very long, but Zagreus keeps on going back over and over, piece by piece, with the help of Nyx and Achilles. He manages to piece together the events of what happened, that Persephone and Hades essentially ran off together, away from the Olympian gods, and against the wishes of the fates, it seemed, had a child together. That was Zagreus, who was stillborn. Shattered by the grief and the pain of it all, Persephone left to her little garden. Hades grew cold and distant, figuring it would be better for all involved if Persephone never learned that their child actually is alive. And Zagreus eventually convinces her that no matter what happens, no matter the risks of the Olympians finding out, his family is all he has left, and Persephone has to return with him, a decision that she agrees with ultimately. They cross on the river Styx, in the blood plays, a real crime happens during it, put a pin in it for later, and credits roll. Now, for the sake of really explaining what I mean, I'm going to quickly overview the epilogue. Trust me, it's important. Basically, Zagreus has to keep doing his breakout attempts to keep up appearances until Persephone decides to throw a party for the Olympians. Zag hands out the invites to all of the Olympians. They explain everything, sort of, mostly. Make a cheeky lie about how Persephone has to return for a few months every year to the underworld. We get a gold statue. Zagreus works officially as a means to test the underworld's security. Boom. End of Hades, sort of. You can keep playing it. Preordained. No matter how clever Hades is with its genre, they wrote themselves into some really awkward corners. Making a fully diegetic roguelike, light, whatever, one of those games, is neat and works really well in a lot of places, but as I was playing the early access version, a creeping worry washed over me. How do you do this and also have a story where the meaningful release of tension happens when we finish our dungeon crawl? I was in denial about the answer for a very long time, I think, though ultimately there's really only a few ways it could go, right? Like, no matter what else happens, the story has to resolve with Zagreus being able to be doing this game all over again forever, and that limits the possible answers you can take to get there. And again, bless the folks over at Supergiant, they took this huge problem in stride, so a lot of finer details work really nicely. As much as it makes sense how you die and come back, however, they have two very awkward things set up on a collision course. That Zagreus can never truly escape, and that Zagreus' main conflict stems from his abusive dad. Okay, I know what it looks like. I'm gonna talk about trauma and abuse in a YouTube video about a video game, but this point has been stuck in me for I think maybe years by now. This is something else the early access version never really had to deal with, because it's such a wonderfully strong bit of characterization that the final boss of your game is your dad, out here being horribly dismissive and mean to you, and by you I mean Zagreus, who seemingly is incapable of lying or suppressing his feelings. They feed into each other. Zag is defiant and determined to do this thing his father absolutely refuses that he do, and Hades responds to his defiance by being crueler and more dismissive, which makes him more defiant, and it's great. It's horrible, but you know what I mean. It's a great way to set up your game where you have to kill Hades over and over. He's a very interesting jerk to Zagreus, and it's a great dynamic to stew in, and back in the early access of the game, this was all stew, baby. So to go ahead and have an answer to this, one that keeps us dad killing, can be interesting, sure, funny, definitely, but strange in context. And it's something that the game is at least conscious of, right? Like, we have many talks with Persephone, with Hades, with Nyx, all trying to get at the situation here, trying to deal with the inevitable violence and death that has woven itself into this family's blood. There's a weird snag here, though, right? Like, it's fun, because it's the kind of weird snag that upon a fresh playthrough to get footage didn't happen quite as profoundly, so it's a weird snag that's more created by playing it without an ending for like 150 hours or so. But maybe it also still exists? I can't be the one to tell you whether or not this weird snag exists for you, person who maybe hasn't played Hades but sure would like to. Go off and find it. The weird snag is that you spent some time, hours, days, weeks, whatever, living under Hades being rotten to you, mean, spiteful, cruel, and that's the kind of detail a story that seeks closure like this one can't really meaningfully approach. It's variable. And that's not explicitly a problem per se, it's good to tell a story with an ending and all that, but this cruelty that you live under for however long hits a very nakedly mechanical issue where, by virtue of the game as a roguelikeite, you can very easily start to break the flow of it. And I was going to brag real hard about being super good at Hades and escaping after like 6 or 7 attempts on the new file, but also like, I don't know, I definitely got some dialogue on my main file that I've been playing since early access that's kind of out of order too. But this is nitpicking, right? Like, being bothered by small discrepancies in a game that's kind of structured to guess how good the average player will be, and as a sacrifice some things are going to land a little weird, that almost isn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, the small fish, weird dialogue, Zagreus knowing that Persephone is his mother before he learns it actually, that's whatever. Arguably even insulated within the kind of loose narrative flow that we've established. Our narrator is diegetic too, after all, in the atmosphere of the story as a reimagining of a Greek myth that intersects with the fallout of a bunch of other myths, lends itself to a very tongue-in-cheek rapport between the player and even itself. I just kind of wish that it wasn't centered on something as heavy as family abuse. Like, that's kind of the problem of the game in some places. It's too good at engendering a sense of compassion and affection to so many characters that you wind up kind of, I don't know, lost in it. Moments where you can see how much pain Orpheus and Eurydice are in, or Patroclus and Achilles. The kind of brutal emotional through line of Meg and Thanatos' respective broken relationships with Zagreus. Pain is in the atmosphere of Hades, and in its best moments, this pain is suffocating in the best of ways. That's the tension here. Well, we can have a laugh riot with Skelly, we can steal from Charon. Actually, this felt so out of place for Zagreus' character that I almost flat out refused to do it before I learned that Zag at least talks his way into believing it's like a friendly wager, and typing it out loud here actually almost feels worse. It actually almost feels worse. I feel worse about it now. We kind of whimsically deceive Olympus, shrug our shoulders, have a good laugh, and then what? Return to Hades, deliberately losing Orpheus' contract because Orpheus pissed him off for refusing to sing, so he's just stuck in purgatory, pining after Eurydice. Anyway, that sucks, buddy. I'm gonna go have a jaunty little fight to the death with my dad. Ooh, we have fun here. I think this tone really does rest at the heart of my issues here. Back in early access, the levity worked to cut clean through the oppressive feeling of being in this horrible nightmare house because you could not fix your dad. Everything, every relationship you mended, every contract you hunted down in secret, every renovation you made right in front of him was a defiant, powerful fuck you. Having moments of camaraderie in the lounge or reconnecting with Meg and or Than, I chose both, fuck you all, was something you pulled from this petty brooding man and his petty brooding fingers, so much so that what do we do here? I've cleared this one file, gotten Persephone home. Am I just gonna go on fighting my dad as she watches him basically recant on his very flimsy apology now? And sure, it's out of order, but Supergiant has already brought me in. I spent a lot of hours in this game piecing everyone's story together, and the game seems to hope that you do spend that amount of hours doing just that to make sure that you're going to reach a properly good moment of catharsis here. And yet, even that doesn't feel satisfying. Like, I've gotten closer to what's bothering me than before, but to be glib about what Hades does well feels like a disservice, and maybe, just maybe, understanding its high points better would be enough to really help contextualize this? Let's find out. It's kind of an interesting challenge to talk about Hades, the game's good points, without just kind of gesturing at it and going, I mean, look at it. But we're going to hone in here and talk about music later. Sorry, I tricked you. Hades' finer points, beyond the baseline thing about the mechanics of it being incredibly crunchy and satisfying in a really particularly good way for me, someone who's criminally indecisive and needs spreadsheets of information and a set of action figures to play any Fire Emblem game, helps. Actually, let's start small. So there's a darkness mechanic that will randomly select one of your arms and lets you have extra darkness, and I think something else, I want to say gems or health, I can't remember, but it buffs you if you pick it up, and the weapon has like a little dark swirl effect on it. Now, instead of me rolling a d6, because let's face it, that's what I do, we get like a little bit of direction. Oh, I'll use the sword this time. Oh, I'll use the gun, etc., and so on. The other choices from that point start to happen so naturally you're in the thick of it. You know your playstyle, the strengths of the kind of weapon you're using, what your keepsakes do. You're solving problems in your head while cruising through the dungeon. And because it's always a little different each time, your problems get to have a little more finesse and texture to them. So it feels satisfying, like you're never going to not use something in your arsenal given the proper circumstance. Almost. Like, small aside, the Divine Dash is so overpowered, it frankly should have been like a base kit that you can deflect projectiles if you dash. If you wanted people to use anything but Divine Dash for that one, I'm sorry. On top of the mechanical flavor, Supergiant works incredibly well with a tight cast of voice actors, and I don't really know how to describe how good the voice direction is, aside of it feeling like effortless. Like Darren Korb was given all of Zagreus' lines, and the direction just slyly winked at him and went, you know what to do. And like everything came out perfectly on the spot. And it's particularly great in the case of Zagreus because Korb really genuinely nails the feeling of being a kind of defiant, proud, and fiercely compassionate youth like Zagreus. A man who can face his father in bloody death battle and also proclaim,
"I'll save you from the magma fishes,"
to literally no one. It's endearing. He feels like a really rich character because he's our eyes and ears through the entire story and has opinions on literally everything, and makes him vivid and fun to be around. And also, like, legit, Darren Korb, like, the dialogues with Persephone was excellent. Holy shit. I think this is technically the first Supergiant title with a full cast of voice actors, like, fully voicing everything. Besides, like, Pyre's little voice cues in, like, a fantasy language. God, Pyre was so good. This culminates, in my opinion, in the absolute height of Hades' best moments. Good riddance. Now, we talk music. I know that for a lot of people, this moment in a Supergiant game, the moment where everything kind of zones out and you're left with this beautiful kind of melancholy song, was Build That Wall in Bastion, which I butchered in my Bastion video, I'm sorry. I don't know of many people whose first would have been Vagrant Song, which I also butchered in my Pyre video, double sorry. And Transistor doesn't count because that moment is just whenever you want. But for me, my first was wandering into Eurydice's place and hearing this little gem of a song. I was actually originally gonna write exclusively on this song all in my Bastion video, but this line of thought kind of led to the rest of it, but okay. Good Riddance is a song in 3 variations. Eurydice's solo, Orpheus's I almost want to call it a cover, and the duet where the 2 separate takes on the song come together seamlessly. It's great because each variant is kind of reflective of like their own afterlives. Eurydice, as introduced, is hurt and betrayed that Orpheus fucked up and looked back and lost her to the underworld forever, just just as they were about to escape. And like at this point, she's bitter and angry and lost in the depths of Asphodel, which is on fire, but whatever, she's already dead. So the song is like a testament to her solitude. She doesn't feel attached to anything now. No hunger, no sleep. It's release. A bittersweet peace in her own isolation. Whereas, in contrast, Orpheus is singing a melancholy reflection of it, singing a harmony for a song that isn't there. There's music theory to be had here. I know it, I can practically taste it, and I double know it because there's a YouTube comment out there that seems to explain it, but I'm not going to repost a YouTube comment and hope that it passes muster. I should learn music theory. God damn it. Even so, the energy is there, and it's intuitive. You can feel the same words haunting the song as he sings alone, trying to respond to a voice that doesn't want to hear him. Everything that Eurydice frames as a release, a bittersweet letting go, is echoed as a failure, a lament that he has no choice but to relive hearing this. And when they finally come together, it's beautiful. It's just this harmony finally reunited, singing these same words, and the tone shifts to a kind of acceptance. This is who they are now, what their eternity is, intersecting, reuniting, and otherwise apart, remembering each other. I cannot begin to tell you how hard this hit when I did it in early access, because that's the heart of Hades. This song, right here and now. No one has a perfect life here. Everyone is a broken piece of their past choices, and Zagreus can bust his way through hell as much as he likes, but there are some things that can never be perfectly reassembled. Being able to meet each other, even briefly, is what these two, what Patroclus and Achilles, what Nyx and Chaos, what even Hades and Persephone can ask for, and part of the maturity in Hades is recognizing this. in letting go of your private garden, your personal song, opening yourself to what you have and accepting its imperfections. Oh, and also in the blood. I'm sorry, I should be a little bit more thorough. I like The Lament of Orpheus, and who doesn't? It's a song of Corb showing off his falsetto and flexing as he takes on the ambitious role of legendary poet that opened the underworld itself through the power of a song, and yeah, he's a great singer, fair enough. Good job. The hymn to Zagreus is funny. I'm fine with it. It's a well-executed song that has like a gravitas to it that complements the ridiculous premise of it being constructed entirely out of lies, Zag told Orpheus. It's cute. But In the Blood is rough. It's a great song in its own rights. Like, it sums up the thematic thrust of the game. It's epic and swelling and showcases Corb and Barrett like really well as singing voices. I'm not going at the song here on like a structural musical level. I am, however, going to pick at the choice to have the song be fucking diegetic. Welcome to my music attack zone. Like, it feels like major nitpicking to be hung up on this choice when the game's been pretty tongue-in-cheek in a lot of places. How Zagreus learns about his mother's identity through a slip-up on the narrator's part. The game is deliberately lighthearted, and I think my whining desire for the game to be more like Pyre or Transistor needs to be buried, at least until I get this essay off my chest. However, that does not mean that this moment doesn't just kind of kill the vibe of the ending. See, all of the problems I've had about the ending aside, I think the dialogues between Zagreus and Persephone are genuinely some of the strongest beats in the game. They earn their doomed place in this story, and it culminates in a nearly perfect moment.
I know. My heart is racing. Nothing like a river journey to remind oneself that there's no turning back.
This is just such a good moment. The catharsis is just there, and it speaks to everything Zagreus has done as a protagonist who, by the way, basically never changes. Like, his progression, his growth is all reflected instead in the many, many lives he changes through his kind of blockheaded, earnest perseverance, and God, I wish that could be me. God, I wish my well-meaning bluntness could actually solve problems and bring people together instead of it just being a thing I have to be ashamed of and hide forever. But it pays off here for Zagboy. Look at this. Like, they get on the boat. She talks about pretending to be passengers on their final voyage. The song kicks in. I'm basically in tears here. I haven't felt this way since having to kill my boyfriend Asterius the first time. And whoop! Do you hear that? Zagreus can hear the song. He comments that it sounds like Orpheus and Eurydice singing it. How fucking wacky. Okay, I need a moment. I'm getting angry over something really tiny, I know, but it speaks to the inconsistencies I pointed out before, right? Like, Hades is huge, a sweeping, sprawling labyrinth of a game, enough so that I actually couldn't get footage of everything I wanted, and I'm being very brave in admitting this for you all. You're welcome. But in the twisting depths of Hades lies a fundamental problem, in that its very nature undermines itself. For as impressive as a diegetic rogue facsimile is, the game's effort to keep itself a closed loop means that all of the discomfort we live with in the underworld has to live kind of perpetually alongside the kind of saccharine happiness the resolution of said loop has to provide in order to keep you plundering the depths of Tartarus. Let's close out on a similar moment. Transistor, long-term fans of the channel, which I'm sorry for that, may remember, plays a lot with whether or not the songs in it are real. Red is a singer. She even kind of is doing a soft Orpheus thing. She hums everywhere. The songs feel established and real. You can get them on a little music player in your safe room. But they also feel out of time, commenting on things as they happen, which is impossible because she's lost her voice. We never get a solid answer, ever. And that's why Paper Boats just hits that fucking hard, right? Like, the wondering of whether or not the song was something she wrote beforehand or is a representation of her final action gets to be something we speculate on at any point except for the final sequence, where if you're me, you're probably just bawling your eyes out every fucking time. God damn it, this fucking song. In the Blood was so close to this, but it couldn't be this. How could it? The entire core of Hades is a game that is so sweeping, so impressive, so intimate at times, so heartfelt, such a powerful message of learning to find happiness in horrible situations. All of this comes together in a way that's theoretically perfect, but ends up kind of undermining itself in several key locations. It's some of the best parts I've ever seen out of Supergiant, but they come together in a way that's almost for the lesser, and it is extremely weird that it is the ending, complete with some excellent voice work and character choices, that sits at the heart of this misalignment. Also, who on earth would ever say no to Athena in one of those, like, pick one god against the other rooms? Jesus Christ, making enemies randomly invincible? Are you fucking mad? In Elysium, it's a fucking death sentence as she revives the little soul drop guys, so I can't stop them from reforming and I have to kill the stupid soldier guy again? Oh my fucking... Special thanks to Caitlin Fisher, Colleen T, Dector A, Air America, Lewis Wells, Low-Res, Maria Aladren, Alistair V, Natalie Lane Baker, Nurai the Redmarked, Professor Bopper, Saint Rawberry, Thomas Wolpez, and Zetetic.